Now it's time for today's perspective. And as you use your mobile phone or computer, how careful are you about protecting your data whilst at the same time wanting free expression as well? Now, if those are issues that worry you, you've surely heard of the Signal Foundation. It's an organisation that aims to protect free expression whilst at the same time keeping your data out of anyone's hands. The non-profit organisation's key product, of course, is Signal Messenger. President of the Signal Foundation, Meredith Whittaker, joins me now in the studio. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us on the programme. Tell us, first of all, why these issues, notably about protecting data, why is that so important?
Well, the term data is a fairly dry term, but when we talk about what is represented in that data, we begin to get to the heart of the issue. Data about you, about your location, about what you say, about your friends, your family, your contacts, your work, can all be used to harm or control you, to shape your information ecosystem, or to otherwise shape the access to resources and opportunities that you have. And right now we live in a world where a handful of companies and the tech industry in general has so much data about us that is often used in ways that are not beneficial to us. So Signal exists to provide meaningful privacy. We don't have the data. No one else has the data, and we allow you to communicate online in a way that is truly private and preserves the legacy of privacy that we've had for hundreds of thousands of years as human beings.
And how do you get people to pay attention to that? Because I'm sure a lot of us are guilty of it. I'm sure I am as well. You just sort of use the technology without really thinking about the consequences of it.
Yeah, of course. But I don't think this is really a personal choice issue. I think this is a structural issue. If we need to use an app or email or a device to participate in society, we're human beings. We want to hang out with each other. We want to go to the party. We want to be included. So I think we need to look at this as a broader issue. And I do actually think people really care. If you take a moment, close your eyes, and you can do that for real, or
People might care, but they might not know, how to go about solving the problem, what they personally can do about it.
But I do think they care. And I think if you imagine every text you've ever sent, put online, every person in your life can search all those texts. They can search their name. They can search for other keywords. And they can see that really mean email you sent. They can see that time you told that weird lie. They can see when you talked about your boss in a way that wasn't flattering. Of course, that's going to ruin a lot of your relationships. And so at a very personal level, everyone has a stake in this. Everyone knows reflexively what's why they need privacy. And I think you can do small things. You can, protect your information. You can turn off cookies. You can also use and develop apps like Signal, which have set the gold standard for mass private communications across the world by showing that you can actually innovate toward privacy. You can innovate to build more rights-preserving, more democratic technologies, even when we have an industry that is sadly based on mass data collection.
So who's collecting that data and what could it be used for?
Well, right now we have, internet companies across the globe. You have Meta, you have these AI companies that need huge amounts of data. And we know from history that this data can be used for good things, for distributing resources, distributing welfare or social services. It can also be used for things like monitoring and surveilling people, determining who is worthy of protection and who is not worthy of protection, warping people's sense of their reality through these engagement-driven algorithms and other mechanisms that often put the short-term benefits of companies or governments above the well-being of society at large. And the issue here is really who gets to decide what data is collected, and then who gets to decide whose benefit it is used in. Are we making those decisions, or are we the subjects of those decisions that are made by others who may not have our best interest at heart?
Because there's a freedom of speech issue, isn't there? There's a concern that if you start restricting things, then you're also restricting freedom of speech.
Well, I think there is a freedom of expression issue broadly. Can you edit a Google document when your boss is in the document? It's a little uncomfortable, right? Can you challenge an idea if you feel that you might be humiliated for asking a question that everyone seems to know? Are you able to blow the whistle on corruption if you know that the people who are going to be held accountable are watching you and could have power over you. So ultimately, the freedom to express yourself, the freedom to challenge new ideas, the freedom to explore things, the freedom to dissent is fundamentally reliant on privacy and the ability to communicate privately with only those you want to be heard by. And that's exactly the freedom that Signal exists as the gold standard to preserve.
And how do you counter the, I was going to say accusation, it's not an accusation. How do you counter the theory, if you like, that if you're not doing anything wrong, you haven't got anything to worry about?
Well, who gets to define what is wrong, right? We have looked at societies over hundreds of years where authoritarian rulers may determine one day that what was completely permissible a year ago is suddenly criminalized. We can look at the rights for different minorities and the way that those, take a step forward and sometimes are pushed back, sadly, by more retrograde policies. And so I think, of course, if you're not doing anything wrong, according to those who have your data, you might feel safe temporarily, but data is forever. Once it's in someone's database, it can be accessed over and over again. And in the United States, we have a case of a woman who is right now living in prison. Why is she living in prison? Because Meta turned over DMs she sent on Facebook to her daughter that were used as key evidence in a court case where she was convicted of helping her daughter access and deal with reproductive health care in the state of Nebraska following the Dobbs ruling. So that's a clear example of something that was permissible and then was criminalized, and the consequences when data is in the hands of an actor who will turn that over, who will harm someone for their activities, whether or not it was, nothing to hide in 1 month.
Yeah, it's fascinating issue. I know you're also co-founder of the AI Now Institute, studying the social implications, if you like, of artificial intelligence. Why should we be worried about the social implications of it, do you think?
Well, we should be worried about the social implications of any technology that is being threaded through our government's social institutions that are making decisions about what kind of health care you get or what kind of education your child might be accessing or, what you see online, what you believe reality to be. So these are incredibly socially significant decisions. These are socially significant positions for this technology to occupy. So we should be asking why there isn't more research, why there isn't more discussion of these social implications, that pan out, that zoom out to actually look at the role of this technology in society and who gets to decide.
And it's not just individuals, is it? I know you worked as well for Google. One of the organisers, you were of the Google walkout within the company, pushing back against the company's, what you saw as the company's insufficient response to concerns about AI and its harms. It's up to businesses and conglomerations as well to be concerned about this as well, do you think?
Well, businesses and conglomerations right now, specifically a handful of large tech companies that have the infrastructure, that have the data, and that have the platforms, are those in a position to be making these decisions. And when you have a responsibility to, when you have that much power, when you are deciding how our government runs, when you are providing the infrastructure for governments and institutions around the world, that is a huge responsibility. And of course, it should be made with democratic oversight and with those who are most likely to be harmed by misuse of that technology at the front of mind. And what we've seen and what many have seen is that is not always the case. That is not always the driving force behind the decisions that are driving AI.
Just got time to ask you, as the world changes, technology has changed so much, hasn't it, already? How confident are you and how positive are you about the future amid all this technological change?
Look, I don't think this is a question of technology. I think this is a question of governance. I think this is a question of what type of world do we actually want to build? And only after we answer that question can we answer what type of technology will either help build that world or what type of technology will hinder it. And I'm really proud to be at Signal, where we are showing that you can do technology differently. You can do it in an open, rights-preserving, and private way, even in the context of an industry that is rowing, sadly, oftentimes in the other direction.
Good to talk to you on the programme today. Thanks very much for coming in. Meredith Whittaker, who's president of the Signal Foundation, joining us here on France 24. Thanks very much.